I know we're coming out to the end zone, but I wanted to read out a Substack post to you, or a passage from a Substack post to you, because I've been wondering lately whether poor well-being work is not a bug, but perhaps a feature of modern work. And so the Substack post is by a writer called Paul Kingsnorth. I would perhaps better describe him as a modern day monk. He's written extensively about how the root of the polycrisis that everyone is talking about, people call it polycrisis, nested crises. He thinks the root of it is a spiritual crisis. He thinks that our drive toward creating a machine world has dehumanized us. The driving economic force of prosperity and trying to remove obstacles to maximize our freedom to get the things that we want above all else is what's causing this deep unease and a lot of us going searching for things to grab onto. So I'll quote the passage to get your reaction. And this comes from the final installment from a Substack essay series called Divining the Machine. And he begins by quoting a philosopher called E.F. Schumacher. I suggest that the foundations of peace cannot be laid by universal prosperity in the modern sense, because such prosperity, if attainable at all, is attainable only by cultivating such drives of human nature as greed and envy, which destroy intelligence, happiness, serenity, and thereby the peacefulness of man. What is at stake is not economic, but culture, not the standard of living, but the quality of life. Economics and the standard of living can just as well be looked after by a capitalist system, moderated by a bit of planning and redistributive taxation. But culture, and generally the quality of life, can now only be debased by such a system. Kingsnorth then continues, Schumacher distinguishes themselves from today's economists, for whom talk like this is embarrassingly passé. We're all grown-ups now, and we know that living by one is not only necessary, can be justified with software modelling and leader columns in the Times, but a value system which glorifies wealth and accumulation, that builds itself on a platform of want, which inflames and creates more of it daily through a marketing machine which colonizes the human mind. This is what every spiritual tradition in history has warned against, and with good reason. Take, for example, the famous list of the 7 deadly sins in the Western Christian tradition: gluttony, lust, pride, wrath, greed, sloth, and envy. With the possible exception of sloth, we currently live in a culture which not only sees nothing wrong with these values, but actively encourages them. The pursuit of these 6 vices is no longer something to be confessed or repented. It is the very thing which drives our notion of progress, big P progress, forward. So this is who we are. You don't have to be a Christian or a Buddhist to see where it has led us and where it will lead us next. Want is the acid, capitalism is the battery, growth is the engine, greed is the forming energy that moves us to where we are inevitably headed. What is the brake? The answer is as hard as it is old-fashioned. I've come to see that all of the questions raised in these essays, the questions raised in my lifetime of non-fiction writing, and maybe my fiction too, can be said to come back to one word: limits. Modernity is a machine for destroying limits. The ideology of the machine, the liberation of individual desire, sees our world as a blank slate to be written on afresh when the old limits of nature and culture are washed away. This is our faith, that breaking boundaries leads to happiness, that boundaries are barriers rather than opportunities. We strain against all limits. It's who we are.
There's so much I want to say, and I'm going to do it quick. 3 things. We measure productivity on grinding out widgets and financial performance, but long-term productivity for organizations is predicated on creativity, fun, and connection. And we neglect leaving space for that at the peril of future growth. I think it's difficult to quantify. And I think that's something we have to create space for. We're doing it awfully at the moment. So I completely agree on that point. You're seeing this play out with Gen AI. And they said when that was going to come out, it was only going to automate the manual repetitive jobs. But why have we seen strikes with the Hollywood writers, if that's the case? It's the opposite. It's replacing the creativity. The truck drivers not losing their job anytime soon. We've been promised also driving car for a very long time, but it's actually the screenwriters that are. And that is very interesting. It's going to be a dichotomy of organizations, those that prioritize human performance and those that automation, actually. Automation isn't a word. And we're going to see those 2 camps, and hopefully I want this camp to win out, but there's going to be a lot of that. And then lastly, boundaries. I love boundaries. I think work-life balance is rubbish. If you leave it up to chance, work wins every time. If two dogs are in a fight, work and life, work is much bigger, and it's an extra large pit bull, right? And it's going to kill the other one, and it wins every time. So you put in place the boundaries, you define what that is. And then you can find a sense of balance afterwards. And if there's balance, it's life work. Actually, screw that. It's just life. Work is one part of it, not the first part. So I totally agree on all that. It was beautiful.